Assalamu alaikum and Masa al Khair, everyone. It is an absolute pleasure to have you all joining us this afternoon as we discuss energy transition and carbon neutrality by 2050. This is part of the Oman Climate Dialogue series that we are working on together as part of Environment Society of Oman and Asiyad Initiative. And we have amazing speakers who are joining us today. Khalid Al-Harabi, who is a strategic advisor of 4401. Faiz Al-Harthi from Oman Vision 2040, who's head of energy, environment, and natural resources, and Iman Adil as well, who's going to be joining us online from the Regional Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency. She is the sustainability energy expert who is going to give us more on the regional aspect of things. Before we kickstart our discussion, Iman is joining us there. So this is the second session of the series that we have as part of the Oman Climate Dialogues, the second out of four. And the first series, basically, we were setting the scene, discussing the current status of Oman's climate, be it in the environmental aspect, as marine environment, or the atmospheric aspect. And this second session is basically leaping us forward as we discuss Oman's ambitions specifically when it comes to carbon neutrality, but not with an aim of just focusing on just Oman and what has been done. I'm sure we all have heard several sessions of knowing exactly what Oman is doing specifically, but we also wanted to bring up the global and regional aspect of things and where we are at regionally as well and globally. Transitioning to net zero is not easy. I think this is something that we all hear a lot. It is one of the greatest challenges that is facing us all as humankind. And it calls for nothing less than a complete transformation of how we do things, be it how we produce, how we consume, how we move about, how we select our jobs. There's a lot of things that we need to do in order for us to actually help in this transition. And one of the major ways that we can actually contribute to that is also focusing on the energy sector, since it is the source of around 3/4 of the greenhouse gas emissions today and holds the key to averting the worst effects that we're going to be facing as well when it comes to climate change. So replacing a lot of these fossil fuels to renewable energy, to ways that we can actually be more efficient when it comes to energy requires a lot as well. So this is the premise of what our second panel is going to be discussing. We're going to be touching a bit about the global and regional aspect of things, touching upon the ambitions for Oman, and also how the private sector and innovation actually plays a role in stepping into how we can actually move things. So we'll kickstart our panel with Iman from the Regional Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency. And the first question is, we've heard a lot about governments and companies worldwide who are pledging to achieve net zero emissions of greenhouse gas emissions. Today, there was actually a report just reviewing a lot of the companies and governments' ambitions and targets that were set for that. However, we're seeing that there's still a long way to go. Many of these commitments are either not translated the right way, or there's still room to actually be better than what the pledges are right now. So if we're focused on economic transformation, we're seeing some are actually toning down that direction, especially when it comes to the oil and gas sector, and perhaps because of the boom of the European need and demand for energy as well. So are we seeing a loss of equilibrium as a result of that? And what is your take on the situation? And how do we actually find the balance when it comes to energy transition, making money because energy demand is very high, but also meeting our climate commitments?
So, first of all, thank you so much for having me here today, and thank you for all the participants for being with us today. Going back to your question, actually, I believe that the transitioning to the net zero world is one of the greatest challenges that humankind has faced, and it calls for nothing less than a complete transformation of how we produce, consume, and move about. Let's say that the energy sector is the source of around 3/4 of the greenhouse gas emissions today and holds the key to averting the worst effects of climate change and going for energy from renewable sources, such as wind or solar, would dramatically reduce the carbon emissions. A growing correlation of countries, cities, and businesses and other institutions are pledging to get net zero emissions, and more than 70 countries, including the biggest polluters, let's say like China, the United States, and even the European Union, have set a net zero targets covering about 76% of the global emissions. And more than 3,000 businesses and financial institutions are working with the Science Based Targets Initiative to reduce their emission in line with the climate science, and more than 1,000 cities, over 1,000 educational institutions, and over 400 financial institutions as well have joined the race to the net zero, pledging to take immediate actions to have global emissions by 2030. The growth actually in net zero pledges have been accompanied by prolifing of criteria with varying levels of robustness to develop the stronger and the clearer standards for net zero emissions by non-state entities such as businesses, investors, cities, and regions, and speed up their implementation in order to establish a high-level expertise in that field. I would say that the largest oil and gas companies also working now on renewables in parallel to their main scope in order to create a new market for them. At the end, the conventional energy will consume one day. It's not renewable, and having another market is so much reasonable. And we can also see that through huge oil and gas companies as Total and as Siemens as well. It needs time, it needs effort, but it's happening given the current situation and the instabilities of some countries. The energy mix also should be taken seriously, which means that we cannot cut off the oil and gas. This have been raised years ago in the 70s and is still raising nowadays, but we are, I believe, going in parallel, and this is one of the main solutions from my perspective.
Thank you so much, Iman, for that. We'll move on from more of a global perspective to more local, and Oman announcing net zero targets by 2050. There's several components where it really focuses on reducing our reliance on hydrocarbons. There's amazing targets on what sort of scenarios we're looking at, if it's a very ambitious one, if it's business as usual, if it's something that's very much toned down. So that is, for me personally, in comparison to a lot of the other net zero plans, is something that makes sense, that you can actually really materialize as well. Okay, this is where we are at, and this is how we can go about reaching that transition. But the question a lot is, how can we assess this target? We're targeting going to a low carbon energy economy. How do we assess that? What does it mean to Oman? And maybe you could take us, before answering the question, the journey to come up with this net zero plan. Yeah.
First of all, I would like to thank for this opportunity to present about the efforts done by Oman Vision 2040 implementation and follow-up units. The journey started from Carbon Management Lab during the September and October last year, 2022, where most of the concerned stakeholders were available from be it public or private sector in one place in order to come up with the Oman strategies and for net zero. There was a lot of options to be considered for Oman net zero, either to be delayed transition or accelerated or an orderly transition. Take into consideration 5 main objectives. It is sustainable environment and also energy cost and supply of energy, and also most important, the socio-economic impact. Based on that, we have come with the best paths to be considered as an orderly transitions path toward net zero, where 5 main objectives have been touched there, and economic viable will be there. We take into consideration 2 paths. First of all, the high priority paths, where the low cost to abate, where the quick wins just we can start. Technologies available, for example, solar, wind, or some of, or already in electrical vehicle. This is like a quick win for energy transition. The second path is high level system choice with high abatement cost, where it's required some maturity in the technology, where you have to choose from either, for example, going for the hydrogen, for the vehicle, or just we're starting with electrical vehicle. So a lot of discussion have been set for that. And the overcome from the Carbon Management Lab, we have set a target for Oman as 90 million ton CO2 equivalents, and 95% from that emission came from 5 main sectors: oil and gas, transportation, manufacturing, or I can say it, and also building and city, and electricity, we can say it in the power. And the most important now, the strategy already set and endorsed by high level in Oman. And alhamdulillah, it came with the endorsement of His Majesty Sultan Haytham bin Tariq to set 2050 as Oman net zero targets. And based on that, we have to work all cooperatively in order to achieve that target. It's not easy journey. We are just starting. So the most important here to involve all the stakeholders to have one vision, one direction toward the 2050s, and setting the strategic target. The next steps here now is the most important, to have the dedicated plan with clear milestones for the schedule and times. And rather, the third part is to follow up the progress of the implementation. About 49 projects have been come from Carbon Management Lab, and just now is followed by Net Zero program, national program. And good to mention that, alhamdulillah, there is an approval endorsement of setting a 6th national program, part of Oman Vision program called Net Zero program, and it's led by and supervised by His Excellency Engineer Salim Al-Aufi, the Minister of Oil and Gas, and supervised by Environment Authority with supervision from His Excellency Dr. Abdullah Al-Amri. So a lot of efforts already started in order to confirm and to ensure the implementation. In addition to that, as Oman Vision 2040, we are ensuring that the plan is set and followed as per the strategy, and also to be transparent in order to present part of our reports. As you know that during the last 2 days, our second report has been already announced, and hopefully by next year we will show the progress for each program, including the national program for a PMO office for a net zero. So the most important here to have this momentum of having a responsibility in moving this sustainable journey for Oman toward 2050.
And I think also, if I may, based on the discussion that we just had before we kickstarted the session, was also the need for transparency on our performance,
Yes.
where we are at, where we're good at, where we're actually dropping. So this actually plays a role in the assessment as well.
Yes.
So
Yes.
by the time we reach 2050, as you, within this capacity, how can we all say that we have really reached the target? How is the assessment going to be? Is it just being basically based on reports, or is there other initiatives coming as well?
It will be based on the report, and then other things you will test the difference. As you know, now a lot of efforts have been already done. For example, a royal degree for a renewable energy lands already there, and electrical vehicle acceleration of the process from regulatory framework already set. So a lot of efforts have been done already, and it's been seen among us. And I think this is it's our responsibilities. And if there is collaborations between as a producer for the energy and the consumer, we will reach to the target all together, inshallah.
Inshallah. Now, moving on to 4401, an example where I think every Omani is very proud of, because we're really harnessing Oman's nature as well to cultivate something that we're really looking forward towards, decarbonization. So Khalid, what can be done to promote innovation for climate change specifically? 4401 is in that space of really thinking out of the box, not only in the region, but really in the world. It is something that's a pioneer at the moment that a lot of young people and startups as well are looking towards really emulating as well. So how could we really push that widespread spread dispersion of technology that will really help in low emissions, in climate resilient technology? And if you could tell us a bit about that journey to reach where you have so far.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much to Asiad and ESO and the Environment Authority. If this was not for you guys, we wouldn't be here as a climate innovation company. And, back to your question, I think there are three things that we can do to, building on what Faisal said, to have that momentum, one goal, one direction, one story, until we reach 2050 with net zero. I think three things. I think number one, what's very important for us is understanding the big picture. And in understanding the big picture, and back to your point, there are three scenarios that we will see by 2050, and we need to decide what scenario would work better for us here in Oman. There is the business as usual scenario, where we will see the Earth temperature rise 1.5 or above, and it will be unsustainable for us and for life on Earth. And there is another scenario where it would be very ambitious, where we have a lot of innovation, where we can reach negative emissions. And we can also have a third scenario where we do nothing, and it will also be unsustainable for us here. And we already seen that in the past 20 years, the number of natural disasters has been increasing, I think, almost by 20 folds as a result of the industrialization and the impact of climate change on the planet. And with understanding the big picture, I think number two, the point is capturing the momentum. We need to know, since our direction is having that ambition for exploring negative emissions technology and innovation, we need to know which of the solutions to climate action solutions is more suitable for the society. There are so many solutions out there, from ocean alkalinizations to forestation to reforestation. And we believe in the company that all the solutions are needed if we are to reach net zero. And the third thing is, to be honest, is to turn our dreams and our hope and our alignment into action. The world is moving very quickly in capturing the opportunities of climate innovation. And companies like 4401, our story is very interesting. We started 3 years ago, where the founding team had the same question. What would you do to make the most positive impact on our environment by 2050? Which solution would you choose? And from then, the founding team had criteria. Which solution would be the cheapest, the safest, the more localized, and the more scalable solution? And this is why we resorted to speeding up a natural process. It's called mineralization, where we take carbon dioxide, and through peridotite rocks, which is an ultramafic rock that is abundant here in Oman, it's turned into rock, so it permanently, cheaply, safely, and scalably removes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So these are the three things. I think, number one, we need to understand the big picture and the three scenarios. And there are a lot of tools that can help us to decide which scenario works better for us in Oman. One of our favorites is the IPCC report, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And they extensively, there are hundreds of scientists around the world who detail very independently all the solutions and all the technologies, and they evaluate them and they recommend for the world which way would be better to go forward. So this is why I think, especially when it comes to making sure that we reach the goal of reducing the Earth's temperature by 1.5, it will not be enough for us to implement traditional climate action solutions. And this is why it's
Define traditional climate action solutions.
Forestation has been a wonderful, wonderful option to reduce Earth's temperature, to create opportunities, to create sustainable livelihood and communities. But now the technology can do a lot of work in helping also in reducing greenhouse gas emissions as well.
All right, thank you so much, Khaled. Speaking of the 1.5, a research that actually just came out yesterday says that the first days of June this month exceeds the 1.5 degrees threshold. June of 2023 is the first time temperatures exceed the pre-industrial level by more than 1.5 degrees this month. So there's no time as the present in order for us to actually start thinking of these solutions as quickly as we can. Moving back to Iman, we saw in the very quick survey that we did that the cost curve for renewables has really significantly declined since the 80s and even since the last decade. But the perception, and it was very evident as well, that the majority here, the perception is that the time and their cost is still very prohibitive in order for us to meet that market demand. Is this accurate, first of all? And when we talk about the region specifically, we're seeing a lot of movement when it comes to adopting renewables, specifically in Egypt and the UAE, and Oman as well is moving as part of its net zero plan. What is the current catalyst that's moving the region in order for it to adapt more when it comes to the renewable energy ambition as well?
Okay. So no, it's not that much accurate. So the cost curve has been declined and lots have been already done. However, we still need to work more in a strategic perspective for more efficient way, considering the combination of the global annual investment needs to be quadruple to reach the internationally agreed 1.5 degree. And the access to finance also should be for both supply and demand side. I believe that we need to focus more on the policies to promote investment for both direct and indirect investment, as the fiscal incentive as well needs to be enhanced to cover all the pillars for more catalyzation of renewables through reimbursement mechanisms, through tax and duty exemptions, through land lease, through creating trusted service provider by having a trusted service provider within the investment and financing projects. And this is also in addition to having the risk management from the early stages and to bring guarantees to ensure the continuity, which will mature the technology and lead to more and more from renewable energy projects. Needless, of course, to mention that it's quite normal for the governments to start with high cost and to initiate and invest lots at the beginning, as the case, for example, in Germany and in Egypt as well. Then the technologies became more mature and people get familiar with this kind of project, which enrich the decentralization projects and lead to catalyzation of renewables. This, of course, affect the cost at the end. And by then we can regulate the renewables cost.
Thank you so much, Iman. I'll jump into Khaled and then come back to Faiza with my question. And I think it's maybe connected to what Iman also mentioned about like really making sure that there's policies that are coming in. And you mentioned what 4401 or 4401, I'm not sure which is the right way to mention. 44.01, okay. is doing carbon capture at the moment. And some might call it very trendy. Like carbon sequestration is the term that we hear a lot when it comes to a quick solution to actually like fix climate change and the issues that we're facing. And we're seeing also that this market is expected to grow to, according to estimates, to 2 trillion Omani riyals by 2050. That's a huge market. So it's no longer trendy. It's like it is a must for you to actually do. But this is also pushing demand for expertise in the sector in a lot of these fields, specifically when it comes to carbon sequestration. It pushes green jobs as well and the need for it. So how do you see this growth in Oman? Is it still you think it's trendy, or is it going to stick in Oman and in the region? And what are you doing now in order for you to attract these talents before they go elsewhere and go to mega companies that actually are producing fossil fuels, for instance?
To be honest, I will credit it to education and the awareness raising that is being done by so many universities, schools, and I feel the current generations and future generations are a lot more aware than my generation of the importance of climate change. And I don't think it's about being trendy, because all of us have witnessed the impacts of climate change firsthand. Since Gunu, then Fet, then Mekunu, we feel there is a realization that there is something a lot that, going on, and that is not about being trendy. And yes, carbon capture is an important part of the process of what we do, but we are more into the mineralization, taking the carbon dioxide and then mineralizing it subsurface. So it's whatever the world is doing, it's working somehow in raising awareness. And I see that the world is now divided into almost 3 categories. There are the skeptics, people who are still very suspicious of innovation and new technologies that come about, whether it's EVs and whether it is mineralization, whether it's carbon capture, or just any new technologies in general. And this is normal. And there are people who are late adopters, and their attitude is, let's wait and see. We will see who in the world will support this technology. After 5 or 10 years, maybe we will adopt it.
So the Chai Karak model of
yes.
I'll do what the others have done.
And Waraq al-Ainab model as well. And there are people who are early adopters. Once you know, as Engineer Faiza has, once you know that this is in line with what is good for the planet, once you know that there is something that the science is fully behind it, once you know that your national strategies are fully behind it, and you get all the stakeholders behind it, like what happened in the Carbon Lab, where Oman 2040, Environment Authority, Ministry of Energy and Minerals, state-owned enterprises, all of them came and to study how can we reach to net zero. Once you have all of this, you have the last segment, which are the early adopters. People, once they do their homework, they jump on new technologies and innovations. It is this segment that win. If you are good in studying your science and doing your homework and adopting innovations, you will capture that $1 trillion market. And actually now, after the Inflation Reduction Act in the US, the carbon CCUS market in general, it's expected to reach $6 trillion by 2050. And this means clean technology jobs, clean technology supply chains, value chains, opportunities for small and medium enterprises, opportunities for startups, and opportunities for large enterprises as well. So if you are an early adopter and you play your cards right, not only that you contribute to saving the planet, but also you create yourself a mover and shaker in the green technology and clean technology.
So would you say that we're there yet? We can be the mover and shaker?
I think we have 2 years to...
2 years.
2 years window.
To be the mover and shaker.
To decide whether, because, it takes a village. It cannot be only Environment Authority, it cannot be only MEM, it cannot be ASIAD, it cannot be the state-owned. It has to be even the public. We need the graduates to want to have clean jobs. We want corporates to make the right decisions. We need organizations to set decarbonization policies. And like you rightly mentioned, we need the policies that incentivize everyone to align with each other. And we are almost there. We are working, and in Oman, we love consensus. Everyone has to agree and say yes before we move into one direction. And I think we have a window of, this is my own personal estimate, if we, within 2 years, get that consensus working in our favor, I think we will have a sizable chunk of this $6 trillion market. If we miss this window, we will probably miss the same thing that happens in the first industrial revolution, second industrial revolution. But this is not something that is unique to Oman. Taking advantage and making the most out of disruptive innovation is something very hard. But I think we have the education level, we have the investment and the capital that Iman mentioned, we have the finance to make it happen as well.
Definitely. Faiza, moving on to you, and maybe it's an uncomfortable question, but this is a criticism that at least I hear a lot, and I've also been amongst the people that just don't understand. So the net zero plan has specified that the main carbon emissions and what needs to be cut is from 5 sectors. But also, going back into history in 2016, when we had the oil crash, Oman came with a diversification plan of 5 sectors. So we love the number 5, we know that for a fact. But we focused on saying that fisheries, tourism, manufacturing, logistics, and mining are the top 5 sectors that we need to focus on, and they're all energy intensive. Where are they in the net zero plan? Because I don't see them mentioned anywhere. And we have plans of moving away from fossil fuels to these 5 sectors that have all state-owned companies that are working on developing the sector as well.
It is a good question, and I think it touched based on the confusions among all of us. So why we have choose 5 main sectors within our strategy? Because it is come about 95 from the baseline from those sectors. It is energy, be it oil and gas or electricity, transportation, industries, building and cities. So mainly 95% from energies came from that. So in other hands, that we have 5 main diversification sectors. So I will let you know how it links to our net zero targets or net zero sectors. For example, when we talk about tourism, tourism is across sectors where we have to have an energy, where we have to have some building and city, where we have a behaviors of our individual can play a vital role with the tourism, like go green, try to utilize a sustainable ways of tourism. For example, try to walk as much as you can and less utilization of transportations. Try to avoid long distance transportation. So a lot of things within tourism sector is a behaviors initiatives. And alhamdulillah, within Oman, a lot of initiatives have been started with tourism. Be it, for example, Yeti Sustainable City is part of, I think, the big major project for the tourism and big cities for a sustainable cities. And if I come to the fisheries, fisheries is mainly like, it's not a mitigation sectors. What we have chosen is the mitigation sector. A fishery is part of the adaptation sectors, where the impact from the climate change affect our fisheries. Our fishery in direct or indirect. For example, pollutions, wrong utilization of our sea, and also avoiding utilizing of plastic. A lot of things have been done from humans to affect the fisheries. So there is a link between the diversifications and our targeted sector. If you talk about logistics mainly the transportation. So it is part of our agenda and part of the mitigation process. And the final one is, I think,
Mining.
manufacturers. and still there is information technology. The manufacturers is part of our industrial sector, where we have to think about greener types of manufacturers, be it green recycling, or how we can have an energy resource for our manufacture comes from either renewable energy or come from, like, for example, how to make our resource for the steel or aluminum to utilize hydrogen as a feedstock instead of utilizing the natural gas for that. So a lot of links between the diversifications, and another diversification sector is information technology. So I think information technology is an enabler for our decarbonization scope, can be part of to having dedicated portals in order to measure and have a reporting system for ESG, or having a reporting system for a net zero. And how this should be linked with the right communications, right links with all the concerned entities or authorities, to have a one national portal for net zero implementations and follow-up, where it can be more transparent, to be visible to all of us, to track the progress of the net zero. So I don't think there is a mismatch between the diversification and what we have set in our orderly transition toward the 2050 net zero. So I hope that I have covered your questions in somehow.
You definitely did. I think I'll jump into the last question that I have for you, Faiza, and that has to do, you touched a bit about the transport and logistics sector. And we know, as part of the net zero plan, electrification and going on EV, we are going to be utilizing a lot of electricity. Do we have the infrastructure in place for the coming 15 years once we switch to be able to sustain all of this, or do we need to do more?
Okay. For transportation sectors, it links directly to the power systems KPI, and have been set. I don't know if you have gone through our transition strategy toward the net zero. You can see there is a match between what have been done for the transportation KPI and for the power system, in order to have a sustainable energy to feed the electrification work, which can be in an indirect way, it will support the electrification vehicles. So, for example, we have set minus 3% of transportation's emission by 2030, and minus 34% by 2040, and 100% by 2050. It's not meant that all our cars will be electrical vehicles, but mostly, like, more than 50% of our vehicle will be sustainable vehicle, be it hydrogen for long distance or electrical vehicles. And alhamdulillah, while I am coming, I have heard a news that about 90 electrical chargers have been set for along Oman and among all the regions. And the target by end of the year that you can drive from Muscat toward Salalas without any issues with electrical vehicles, or from Muscat toward Dubai. So this is a huge effort, and I can say that an excellent effort have been made with a short period from the announcement of net zero. I can say from October last year till now, we are about 6 month periods, and a lot of things have been made in real.
Which really ties up to Khalid's point of being the movers and shakers, and this just shows that Oman is very serious in being a mover and a shaker, for sure.
And another thing, there are a lot of incentive toward electrical vehicles, be it like exemption from the registration, exemption from the taxations. So this will enable us to move faster toward the transition in transportation. And another side, for about energy producer for renewable energy, also there is a lot of plan have been made. And recently, about 1 megawatt have been already, 1 gigawatt of manah have been already awarded and already started with the constructions. And another project for a wind project will be started soon with OPWP. In addition to that, green hydrogen project will be aligned. And hopefully later on that green hydrogen renewable energy will be linked to the grid, but still it's not, no decision have been taken if it will be allowed to be connected to the grid or not. But the momentum of moving to the renewable energy is there. And the good things that I want to touch base on, that our power generation's efficiency have been improved up to now 46% in utilizing the natural gas for our power station since 2005. And hopefully this will be improved further to more than 60%. For example, utilizing the same amount of natural gas in order to produce higher amount of outcome from the generation. So the most important here, the energy efficiency part of the process, or part of utilization and consumption of the energy in order to allow other initiatives to be there. For example, when we have a renewable energy, that will have an excess of natural resources for the gas, like for example, natural gas can be utilized for industrials in other hands, or we can export it as LNG with a high revenue income for the Oman.
So yeah, we've done our homework and we're very much ambitious when it comes to reaching those targets, which is a breath of fresh air for me as well, hearing it from officials as well, that we are really serious in meeting our ambitions. Iman, I have a final question for you, and perhaps a bit more political in nature. We hear a lot about ESG at the moment, specifically when it comes to investments. We hear a lot about energy transition. If we set a Google alert today on energy transition, you'll get tens of articles every day on this. While it is very important to discuss this, these two have also become very political subjects. And we're seeing more countries and states that are being at odds with the subject. Some are with, some are against, some pick and choose and are not really committed to it, as we've seen some examples of that globally. And we're seeing also that renewables has been lumped into the discussion as well within this. So how do you respond to that? What can we do when it comes to this narrative specifically?
So first of all, let me say that it's been a political subject since decades. I mean, the energy security and the energy mix is one of the national securities of the countries, and the big industrial countries also have large economical intervention in the solar panels and wind turbines manufacturing. On the other side, the countries with conventional resources should have invested those resources at the current situation. Of course, they are working in parallel with renewable energies for their future and for the greater good of the whole planet, and to achieve the financial and the mitigation actions of the Paris Agreement goal. However, they cannot ignore the resources and the overall economic cycle in the context of the country itself. So I believe that we need to be more realistic in that. We have also over 160 firms with around $70 trillion in assets have joined forces behind the common goal to steer the global economy toward the net zero emission and deliver the Paris Agreement goal. And the new Glasgow Financial Alliance for the net zero, chaired by Mark Carney, UN Special Envoy in Climate Action and Finance, brings together leading net zero initiatives from across the financial system to accelerate the transition to the net zero emission by 2050 at the latest. Let's cross fingers for that. Members include major asset owners and managers, as well as banks, with the power to mobilize trillions of dollars behind the transition to the net zero. By working together, the alliance member can catalyze the strategic and technical coordination on steps firms needs to take to align with the net zero future. So all the members will set the science-aligned midterm and long-term goals to reach the net zero and no later than 2050, in line with the criteria of the UN Race to the Zero campaign. And this will, of course, include short-term targets, action plans, and supplement actions with these goals. So it have been always political, but this is the case, and we have to be realistic toward it.
Thank you so much. Being realistic also to reach the goals is very much important, specifically when it comes to really tackling such an important issue that we all agree is very important. So moving on to the very last question before I ask a question to all our panelists. Are there any, so we talked about the importance of actually having that collaboration. It has been a political thing. Do we see gaps when it comes to international cooperation, when it comes to adopting such technologies, such transitions? And what can we do in order for us to all come together as well?
I think that's a great question. I think there are three things. One, Iman and Faiza, both of them touched on it, which is climate financing. I think we need more. The whole space of startups now talks about something that is called clean venture building, which is organizations that finance and they maintain organizations from scratch until they are at growth stage, which are focused on clean technology. So that's number one. I think we need clean venture builders. And the second thing, we need incentive schemes or legislations, such as the infrastructure Inflation
Reduction Act. Okay.
Act in the
We're
US,
hearing that there's something similar coming for Oman. Are we assuming that? We don't know. Faiza. Okay.
I think part of the $2 billion Oman Future Fund will be dedicated to startups, and part of that fund to startups, part of it is also clean technology.
Amazing.
So there will be part of it as well. So there is a lot of importance to create an incentive scheme so that young people and everyone that is interested in entrepreneurship, they will not only look at traditional SME routes, but they will also think about creating clean technology ventures as well. And what I like about this example of the IRA in the States is that it tied clean technology to infrastructure. So this is something that is very long-term and very visionary. And the last thing is, separate from financing, we need also a lot of angel investment. It's very important to have competition in schools, and it's very important to have some programs about the environment in the media and media campaigns. But we need also to finance ideas even at the school level. One thing about that, we are assuming that between now and 2050, all of the ideas will either come from the large corporates or state-owned enterprises or from startups and SMEs. I think actually most of the emissions reductions in the future, they will come from ideas with people who are even below 15 years old of age.
It's actually very interesting that you're saying that. ESO has a competition that is launched every year called Namat School Competition, where we focus on energy efficiency and water efficiency, and there are a lot of innovations from schools all across Oman, in different governorates of Oman, that covers them all every year. So perhaps maybe we can have 4401 and
we're very happy if anyone is interested in
connect.
supporting that. My colleague Charlie, we're in 4401, and we notice it every time we have an engagement with schools. We notice that the comments and the ideas that come from school children, the difference between them and ideas that come from others is that they have no boundaries. We have grown up in a world that is already very well structured, finance-wise, energy-wise, transport-wise, and the kids in school, they can imagine what the world will look like in 2050 without those constraints and boundaries. So that emissions reductions that we are very worried about now, and we think it's unattainable, that 1.5 reduction, for these generations, they might just have that idea. And this is very similar to something that's happening in another sphere, artificial intelligence and IT. All of a sudden, just 2 or 3 months ago, someone came up with the idea with ChatGPT, where artificial intelligence now is in everyone's phone. And nobody was imagining that was going to happen. And I am really praying and hoping that if we invest through angel investors, people who will, because it's not only, we will not get anywhere if we only invest for returns. Yes. We need to invest when the kids were, even if the return is not immediately obvious. I hope that makes
Definitely,
sense.
I agree 100%. Final question before we open it up to the questions from our audience. Iman, Faiza, and Khalid, are there parts of the energy transition or decarbonization discussion right now that you do not believe in or would not invest in? It's a tough question, but I'll have Iman start first and then jump to Khalid and then Faiza.
This is a very tricky question, but actually it's very nice because I believe in that no, there is nothing that we will not go further or invest in, but I believe that we have to consider also the energy efficiency because the concept or the initiative of energy efficiency comes first from my perspective is more important as we are consuming lots and we are wasting lots of energy that cost us money, time, and effort, and of course cost us GHG emissions. So going for the energy efficiency first in residential sector, in commercial sector, and even in transportation. Above all, of course, the industrial sector is going to enhance our achievements and fast forward movement towards the 1.5 goal and toward more renewables. So what I believe in that we need also to invest more in the energy efficiency in order to achieve our climate goals and adaptation goals.
Khalid.
It's a very interesting question, to be honest. And I feel that one thing that is very important for us, hopefully, to move towards is firmly believing that climate action oversight and monitoring is very important. What is not good is hesitation, because hesitating to believe in the importance of climate action leaves the door for climate denial and climate skepticism. And we really don't have time for that anymore. So I believe in climate action oversight and monitoring, but we should not really hesitate a lot. One of the things that I think is very important for us here in the region, also in the conversation surrounding energy transition and the net zero. There is a lot of talk about the immediate breakaway and movement from fossil fuel and calling it dirty energy. I think that is not very healthy for the conversation in the space. And the reason for that is that for a century, for 100 years, there has been a disparity in socioeconomic progress because there are countries who knew how to make use of the oil and gas and hydrocarbon economy for 100 years. And there are parts of the world, like our part of the world, that was only able to benefit from this starting from the 1920, if you're counting Bahrain, then 50, then 70, Oman. So it is very important to have that conversation that does not put off economies that are hydrocarbon dependent. And I think if we can reach this balance in the conversation that does not scare away communities, that their socioeconomic progress will be impacted if we move away directly from hydrocarbon economy, I think the whole world will be aligned behind climate innovation, climate action, energy transition, and net zero. But sometimes this very aggressive push towards the immediate abandonment of fossil fuels, it will only backfire for the whole world.
I think that's why we also have a lot of skepticism when it comes to climate, specifically in this part of the world. It's a major benefactor of the sector. So how do you say that this is not something that benefited me?
So the conversation, right? I think, it just needs to be balanced so that Definitely. It doesn't put any...
Faiza?
It's a tricky question, as have been mentioned by Khalid and by Iman. So the most important here is to have a high authorities commitment levels from the top down, where it can ease the process and action being taken place. So it will be like a balance between the socio-economic and environment requirement, where sustainable development goals is there. But the tricky question, what you have asked, where we don't have to invest for the time being. So the most important now, we have to think about the maturity of some of the technology and the cost driven for that technology. For example, is this the right times to move to the CCUS or to move to the hydrogen for electrical vehicles, where a lot of challenges still is not being resolved. For example, for the hydrogen, for the light vehicles, a lot of issues in terms of storing the hydrogen, a lot of investment is required for locally for the infrastructures. And in addition to that, you know that hydrogen as a gas, it comes from a combination of water. So how we can utilize this more efficient and how it can be more affordable to utilize. The most important here to have that energy trilemma, where it should be affordable, securable, and sustainable. In addition to that, we have to think about sustainable. Sustainable means we have to have a balance between environment, peoples, and economy, where 3P should be there. The 3P is the peoples, or the planets, and the profitable from the economy. So this, all the measures should be there before the investment, and visibility study should be there in order to move to the new technology.
So be wary more on things that need a bit to be proven
Yes.
before moving ahead. Well, Faiza, Khalid, and Iman, it was an absolute pleasure to have you here and really, really enrich the discussion. I really enjoyed this discussion. Our upcoming panel is going to be discussing adaptation and how nature-based solutions is actually going to be one of the major solutions that we are actually looking into when it comes to combating climate change. That is going to be sometime in August. You could search for it at Oman Climate Dialogues and register for it. So thank you so much for tuning in, for those who are tuning in, and for our audience. We will be opening it up for questions very soon, but for those who are listening in and tuning in, just watch out for the coming session that is coming on August. Thank you so much. So we will open